Hi, everybody. I'm Michael Russell from Lee Summit North High School. In this session, we're going to look at Mid-Continent Public Library's databases and content-specific resources for our various departments around the district and the secondary schools. So this presentation, the slides will be available. There's a bit.ly right there to go directly to it. We'll also link it on the spreadsheet with all the various times of our secondary librarians' presentations from this week. So let's jump in. First thing I want to talk about is how to integrate some of these resources directly into Schoology, because Mid-Continent's website is huge, right? When you start poking around, it's easy to get lost. And if you send a kid there with just verbal directions or printed directions, go to research and learning, look for this tab, go there, it's really easy for them to get lost. So we want to make sure that we can add very specific links to Schoology. And typically, with all of these resources that I'm going to show you with this particular session, you can just copy that URL up at the very top and then paste it into a Schoology page. So real quickly, let me pull up my Schoology. I'm going to go to my class. As a librarian, we just have one class where I can create assignments, and that is our library assistants, but you know how that works. So add materials, add a file link external tool. We're going to click link, paste in the URL of exactly where you want them to go. Oops, I didn't copy. Copy, paste, a title. And then once you add that, students will click and they will go straight to that link. But if it's their first time going there that particular day, they're going to hit a firewall. Mid-Continent is going to say, what's your library card number? Good news, nearly all of our students in the schools have a Mid-Continent Public Library digital library card through our new arrangement. This started last year. We had been working on it for a long time, and it's fantastic. So most of the kids have a digital library card. So at enrollment registration every year, there's a question on those many forms that asks parents if they want their kids to have this. So when I say most of our kids, I think the last time I looked at Lee Summit North, 4 kids did not have this card. So the card number for Mid-Continent Public Library for our kiddos is LS plus their student ID number. So really, really easy to remember. Of course, the first couple of times you post something, it would be good to remind them of what that number is. Nearly all Mid-Continent Public Library resources on the digital side do not require a password. All they need to get in is that LS plus their student number. For the rare instance where they do require a password, their password is the 8-digit combination of 2-digit birth month, 2-digit birth date, 4-digit year, and that will get them in. Now, there are some exceptions. Like I said, not every single student has one of these cards. And if you have a student in your class that does not have access to a digital public library card for Mid-Continent, there is a solution, and that is all of our school libraries have 1 or 2 school use cards. Those are good for somewhere up to 1,000 people at the same time accessing Mid-Continent's resources. Talk to your school librarian about those. I will show you real quickly where ours is at Lee Summit North. On our research page, and I think this is true for most of the high schools, all 3 high schools, we have a document called the Web Passport. It has all of the passwords to all of our databases, things that need a password from home. Those Mid-Continent Public Library cards or school use cards are on that document. You do need one password to get in there, but if you don't know what that is, if the kids don't know what that is, talk to your school librarian. That way, all of your students can have access to all of these fantastic resources. At this time, we don't have teacher cards, but you can use your own teacher card, your own personal Mid-Continent Public Library card. If you don't have one of those on their website, you can sign up for one just on the left side. It's really, really easy to get a brand new card. I mentioned this last session that I did. Talk to your school librarian. We can also partner with Mid-Continent to get print materials for your classes, for book clubs, for lit circles, for in-depth research if there's something that we don't have here in the district to provide for you. We've also frequently over the last several years had students doing research on very specific topics where we did not have print resources. Mid-Continent did not have print resources. Even like UMKC here in town did not have print resources that were adequate to what most of the time it was IB students, but what they were looking for. And so we can request print copies from universities around the country and get those in. Typically, students have about 2 weeks with those materials before we have to get them back. I'm not sure how that's working right now with COVID, but it's certainly worth asking if that's something that you want to try and get for some of your students. Also, Mid-Continent is always willing to partner with us, partner with you in your classrooms, because we want to build that bridge moving from high school into the rest of their life to create lifelong learners, lifelong readers, and just really see Mid-Continent as a great resource for the rest of their life. So there's about 70 to 75 resources on here that I want to talk through. I'm not going to get to all of them in the next 19 minutes or so, and that's okay. I'm going to start with historic newspapers. And for the sake of time, rather than going through all of Mid-Continent's web of resources, I'm going to link off of this or off of this specific page so that you can see where they are, and within Mid-Continent's research and learning pages, you can find them elsewhere. But the specific links are right here. So historic newspapers, first one I want to show you is, as the name suggests, historic newspapers. And there you see what the papers are. There's a handful of them, St. Louis Post-Dispatch. A big one here is the New York Times. Notice 1851 to 2015, so 155, 160 years worth of the New York Times. Phenomenal resource way back in time. So if a student is studying something, I'm just going to throw out the sinking of the Titanic or the Gettysburg battle, and they know the date that it happened, go one day beyond, when newspapers come out, and they can see how that was covered in all these various newspapers. This is a resource that I can just fall into. I think it's really, really interesting to go back in time and see what things look like. Several primary documents in this section here under primary sources and newspapers. American West is kind of fun because there are broadsides. There are lots of other things there. One thing I neglected to mention, I guess I did. When you post something in your Schoology as a link, students will hit that firewall asking them for their library card. Obviously, it's wanting mine because I'm signing in on this computer for the first time. So use that. That's our school use card. And that's exactly what they'll see when they link to these sources. So American West has a lot of primary documents. Like I said, there's maps. There are some old journals. You can see some paintings. There's also a Native American section where you can find histories and information. Here are some of the old maps. And the broadside, there it was, the old Buffalo Bills Wild West show. Lots of interesting things. If you are working on a segment, a unit from the Wild West, that could be some great stuff. Another one for history teachers, obviously, colonial time frame. This has a lot of primary documents as well as things that are translated, because this goes back far enough that some of these, our kids struggle to read cursive with our handwriting. And many of these documents are created back in the 1500s, the 16th century, 17th century, are written in ink and quill and really, really tough to see. So I will point out, you can see that these have different content. So this one, details with full text. If you go down a little further, here's one with image and full text from March 7th, 1644. I'm just pulling this randomly up as an example. Clearly, when you're researching, you're going to look for something real specific. But here's the image of this paper from Her Majesty's State Paper Office. And I don't know about you, but I have a hard time kind of reading that. You get used to it a little bit. But if you go back, they have a translation with the full text to show you what that actually says. And that could be interesting when students are doing research looking for primary sources. So that's the colonial state papers. That gets into some really old stuff. Slavery, abolition, and social justice. This is a huge database spanning 1490 to 2007. Again, some of the highlights are listed here, but they've got maps, they've got journals, they've got essays, a very deep database that I think, especially given modern times, things that we're looking at now with social justice, this could spark a lot of great discussion with things in here. As I think, you know, if students have a choice of what they are researching, this might come up a little bit more often. A little later, I'll show you one with a little bit more current information. This one, I think, goes up to, yeah, 2007. SAGE, I will just mention social science reference. Earlier in the last session, I mentioned a database called O'Reilly, which had a lot of big books on technical things. There was some science, there was some algebra, things like that. I will open this. This has books, but more in the social sciences. So things like psychology, sociology, media, there's some media law in there, education. So depending on what your class is, you could pull up one of these books, look at a specific article rather than the whole book, because that's a little beyond the scope of what most of our kids will do, but a specific article to supplement your lessons. And again, all these are free with their Mid-Continent cards. So some newer resources, Access World News, newspapers.com. Well, actually, newspapers.com is historic. And then, 19th century U.S. newspapers, as the name suggests, takes you back to some older newspapers. This, I believe, has the ability to pull up some original images of the newspapers, as well as the archives themselves, the translated versions. So lots of great old resources from history. Let's bump over here into this middle column. Common problems. CQ Researcher is one of my favorite resources from Mid-Continent Public Library. My favorite is probably Press Reader, but CQ, imagine that you are a news reporter in Washington, D.C., and you have been assigned a story, and you know absolutely nothing about it. And that was the case back in, I want to say, like 1923. A couple of reporters were working in D.C. covering the formation of the not United Nations, the League of Nations, and very quickly realized that they had to write about this and sound like they knew what they were talking about, and they just didn't know. And so they went to somebody who knew a lot of the intricacies and paid them to write a long article for them to give them background information. Forward almost 100 years to today, that still exists in the form of CQ Researcher. So if a student, and this is the most recent post from August 21st, so just a couple of days ago, let's say a student is wanting to do something on economic clustering, but don't really know much about it, or you yourself don't know much about it, and you want some background. These are very lengthy articles that really encompass all the information that you kind of need to know. In some instances, these could be great instances to show kids of a great research article. So just as an example, economic clustering, about big cities and how economies impact them. So there are some pictures with subtitles, there's graphics, there are citations. We love citations, right? Shows you where that information came from. Gives you deep background. Picture of Apple's new campus out in Silicon Valley. Graphic that fewer people are moving these days, which kind of surprised me when I glanced at this. So you can see this is a really in-depth, long article to give you deep background on all sorts of things. There are mentions of new things. Here's what you look for in the future. There's a pro and con. Should the federal government, in this instance, invest in regional communities? You got somebody yes, somebody no. And then here at the bottom, there are some short features, other resources to link to. And as researchers, we of course like to tell students, here are other places you can find information on this if you are researching this. Not only other resources, other people to contact, here are some contacts, and then the works cited or footnotes in this case to show where these things came from. So this is one article just a couple of days ago, and obviously this goes back for 100 years. So if you look at, let's just say, browse topics, here are some of the main things. Let's click on transportation, human rights. So it breaks it down, and then as you look down, I say that, and of course, in a live presentation, it doesn't pop up. Here we go. All the various articles, most of them that same length and that same depth, back to 1945, for all sorts of things. So fantastic place to start, get some background information. That is CQ Researcher right there. I know there's a lot of great writing tools as writing teachers, and all teachers really help kids learn how to write better. You know, Owl at Purdue is a great example that we send a lot of kids to. This is Facts on File Writers Reference Center. This is something that Mid-Continent pays for, and we're happy to use for free with those library cards. Some of the highlights, top grammar errors, often confused words. So affect, effect, desert, dessert, things like that might be a place that you could refer kids to if they need some writing help. A lot of students create visual presentations where they need pictures. One of the big downsides of Google Images is the pictures just aren't right. You know, you pull up a picture of Robert E. Lee and it's actually a picture of General Grant. Different sides, different people, but according to Google Images, it's right. So AP images here and National Geographic images are a collection of lots and lots of images that are correct. They're labeled correctly. They give you ways, give the students ways to cite properly the images that they are using with some authenticity, that they're getting the right stuff. Access video is something that we have new in the district. I mentioned it in the last session. If you didn't catch Jen Coleman's presentations about that for our district, look that up and watch her sessions, or talk to your school librarian, because that's a great new resource that we have. This link here goes to a similar but slightly different version from Mid-Continent Public Library. Overdrive video I'll hit real briefly because there are some documentaries and things on here that can be interesting. For instance, a lot of our teachers at the high schools teach Into the Wild. And as part of that, they like to show Return to the Wild, which they have here, and you can stream. Now, there's one big downside to this Overdrive video, and that is, if we click on this, you will see that they have 2 copies. So you couldn't, say, put a link out there and expect all of your students to see it and access that at the same time, because as soon as 2 students check this out, it will then go into add a hold. But when we come back to school, this might be a way for you as a classroom teacher to pull this up and show it in your classroom as a digital copy without having to mess with DVDs, things like that. So there are a lot of other videos on there for Overdrive, but again, most of those are single user, you know, one license, one user at a time. So just be aware of that. Science flicks, true flicks, these are a little bit younger, probably more appropriate for middle school audiences, but these give you real short explanatory clips that you can add into your lessons, and you know, on various topics. Science flicks, as the name suggests, is science, and true flicks is even a little bit younger, upper elementary, middle school. I think high school kids would kind of point and laugh because it is geared younger. General research, I think in our school libraries, we've got a lot of good general research databases aimed at young adults. A few extra ones. WorldCat is a phenomenally broad database that searches things like ERIC, which is education research. It searches government databases. It searches papers presented at world conferences or conferences around the world, research journals. So a lot of access to information that we might not get in the databases that we have. Same thing, pop culture studies. Legal Track is a little more specific to legal matters, as the name suggests. Consumer reports, I'll just point out, I won't go there. We could use that for a lot of various things, but that is access to the full Consumer Reports magazine. I think they have an index that goes back for about 5 years. So if you personally, or you want to buy a new washer and dryer or a car, or if you've got a lesson on finance and you want to show students how, good ways to weigh one thing over another, Consumer Reports has a lot of great things in there. Press Reader, I showed in that last session. Absolutely love Press Reader. Thousands and thousands of newspapers, magazines from around the world. Kansas City Star Digital Edition. This is the image edition with this link. Mid-Continent has it in several places on their website. Great thing about this is it is not the text of an article like you get in a database. This is the actual Kansas City Star, what it looks like on a day-to-day basis. So you click through here. Today is August 27th, 2020, and you can click this. This will always update with the 5 most recent issues, and you see the newspaper as if you're holding it in your hands. So, hey, cool, I didn't know this. Kansas City's getting an extension on the streetcar. That's exciting. Over here, you can see, you can scroll down. Here are the various sections. So that can be interesting. Also, if you know, kind of like those historic newspapers I was talking about, if you know a specific date of something major that happened, you can go back to that. So let's say February 3rd, 2020 edition. Something happened on February 2nd that was kind of a big deal, at least here in Kansas City. You can go back to the February 3rd edition, and what happened that day? Oh yeah, that's when the Chiefs won the Super Bowl. Same thing if you go back to the 2016 election, the 2015 World Series. Catch all that coverage. It's still there. This goes back, daily editions back to 2013. And some of the other databases that I had mentioned earlier then show the individual articles, but not the full paper. Same thing here. These are individual articles rather than the full issues. New York Times, Nathan Miller, gentleman I work with, who does a phenomenal job here at least up north. He's going to talk about our new subscription to New York Times resources. That's something that we are really excited about. He will do that, I think, this afternoon. In fact, let's just see. That is 11 o'clock. 11 o'clock this morning, so in about an hour. Nathan will do that session. I've got about 3 minutes. Don't have time to get into all of these things. These are broken down by departments, great ways for individual departments, art, business, English language arts, things that aren't typical that pop up that I thought were great links that you might be interested in. One, I will point out IT, not a department we necessarily work with a lot in the library, but these are fascinating. So Chilton Auto Repair Manuals, you can get huge libraries, you know, those giant books of how do you fix your 1967 Dodge Dart. I don't know if that actually was a car back then, but the manual for all those cars are there. Also, small engine repair. I know we've got a small engine class here in the district. So you've got a lawnmower or a weed whacker that breaks. The breakdown of how to fix that and all the various parts are in this database of small engine repair reference center. So that's something interesting for the IT folks. One, I will point out, over here on social studies, Black thought and culture. Again, going back to that comment I made about the social justice database, I think we'll see, I hope we will see more students wanting to do things on social justice and Black thought, culture. So here's the database on that. And so they've got some primary resources. They've got photographs, historic events, things about various people in this database. I will tell you, I've not spent a lot of time on it. This is one that I pulled up and saw recently. I have not noticed it before. So this might be new to Mid-Continent, or it might just be new to me, but something that I think would be fantastic for our students to have access to. A few others there that have some primary resources, such as North American immigrant letters, Civil War letters. American Indian correspondence is an interesting database because it features handwritten letters from missionaries, the white missionaries, of course, who went out west to try and convert Indians to Christianity and tame the savages, as it were. So that might be interesting from a cultural perspective to see that, well, frankly, that bias and what was happening then if you are studying that area. So like I said, a whole bunch of resources there. It's like 75-ish to sort through. Couldn't talk about all of them. If you are curious, certainly feel free to poke through those. And other questions, talk to your school librarian. And as always, we are always happy to help with whatever we can. I will go back here, quit presenting, stop sharing, and just open it up to see if there are any questions in the comments. April says, that's cool. Where do we see these links? Okay, so April, in the schedule, I will post that slide, which gives you direct access. Here you can see from earlier, Megan posted her recording and her presentation. I got my presentation up from the first one, but we'll put those there. Also, just from Midcontinent, most of these, so if you're starting from home, to find these on Midcontinent's website, if you go to Research and Learning tab, you can either go A to Z. If you know what you're looking for, you can go Browse Subjects, which is kind of fun. So a lot of the ones that I showed were either from history of the world or history of the United States. AP and National Geographic images were in here. The newspapers and periodicals and magazines were all in here, and they kind of break those down. Again, this is a place that just as an information geek, I just can get lost in all of these various resources. And you might discover lots of things in there yourself that I didn't show. So that's where you can track down a lot of those links. So anybody else have any questions that I can answer? Fantastic. I will quickly promote some other sessions that are coming up this afternoon, just a couple of minutes. Allison talking about digital breakout boxes, which are lots of fun. We do a lot of breakout boxes here at North, but transferring them to the digital realm can be somewhat challenging. So Allison's going to break that down. Nathan, again, New York Times, fantastic resource that we're rolling out this year. And then Christy's doing one for Lit Circles, and Nathan again this afternoon with OER, Open Education Resources. So some free stuff that you can access online. As always, ask your librarians for help. We want to help any way we can. Have a great start to the year. Good luck, everybody. Thanks.